Let's bring up Sheriff Mack. I can do that forever. Okay, without further ado, Sheriff Mack.
Thanks, Stuart. Thank you. But Stuart really blended into a lot of things that I wanted to say, and some of the questions were really appropriate to what I'm going to be addressing. Okay? Let me tell you right now, I have studied this, and studied this, prayed about it, prayed about it, prayed about it, have been to the depths of depression, dismay, discouragement, and who wasn't during the last election. Okay? If you weren't, then something's wrong with you. And so this book was born out of my complete discouragement and feelings of hopelessness while I was watching the last election. And at the very beginning, now get this, I'm telling you the truth, I really like Barack Obama. Now, first thing you're saying is Sheriff Mack nuts or what? Why would somebody logically like Barack Obama? Because of what he was doing. He was beating Hillary Clinton. I love that. And then it turned out we got both of them. So that didn't last long for me either, did it? No. We're going to get really fundamental with some things here, but the main thing is, while I was thus contemplating our demise in America, and my wife kept telling me to turn the TV off, and I said, I can't stop watching this. It's like, you know there's going to be a horrible wreck. You're always going to watch it, aren't you? Well, I couldn't stop watching the destruction of my country. And it just made me madder and madder, but I still couldn't stop watching. And during that, I said, there has to be some hope. I'm an eternal optimist. And the title of this book came to me right then, and I had it out like 3 months later. This book came out February 15th. It's already sold over 10,000 copies. We're trying to get these out across America as much as we can. The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. If any of you think that there's hope in Washington, D.C., then I'm not going to sell you silver. I've got beachfront property for you in Omaha. Okay? Please see me immediately after this. Okay? Because Washington, D.C. is a write-off. I think you need to know what's going on there. I think you need to keep patting Ron Paul on the back, who I totally supported. I know him. I've sent him a book. He and I still need to talk about that. But you have one chance left to save your country, and it's at the local level. Let me emphasize something before we get going here. This book is a paradigm shift for all of us. You have got to start focusing on this. Okay? All of us at lunch were talking about this and this and this and this and this. All the conspiracy theories, they're wonderful. Yay, we got thousands of them, don't we? We really got dozens of them. If you go talk to your sheriff and ask him why he's not joining other sheriffs and arresting Barack Obama for not really being the president, or what's he going to do about chemtrails, or how about solving the truth about 9/11, or what really happened to JFK, or on and on and on with all these conspiracy theories, and they might very well be true, okay? You're going to lose that battle before you even begin. This is a battle for our country, our Constitution, our nation. The fate of our country does not lie with Barack Obama. It lies with us. It lies with you, the boss of your sheriff, who has the authority, the duty, the jurisdictional responsibility to protect you from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Now let me just do a real brief history here. I was a sheriff in Arizona. I was the first one in the United States to file a lawsuit against the Clinton administration to stop the onerous requirements of the Brady Bill. It's the first time in U.S. history that Congress promulgated a law that commandeered the office of a local official. in this case the sheriff. It was an unfunded, unconstitutional gun control scheme that forced me to participate in gun control that I knew was unconstitutional and knew I couldn't do it. So I filed the lawsuit the very day the Brady Bill took effect. And we also filed an injunction that very day so that they wouldn't arrest me, because the Brady Bill actually said that we could be arrested for failure to comply. And Janet Reno immediately issued a memo pursuant to orders from Clinton that the part that said that whoever knowingly failed to comply would be subject to a year in jail or a $10,000 fine or both only applied to the FFLs, which are the gun shop owners, okay, the federal firearm licensee. So we looked up and already had done our homework. My lawyer, Dave Hardy from Arizona, had already done his homework and knew that was a lie. They actually discussed that wording, and it said, they even discussed, that sounds like we're going to arrest the sheriff if he doesn't obey us. And they left it. Okay, and then Judge Roll in my case said, Janet Reno can't change the law by fiat, or in other words, by writing a memo. And so it stayed. We got our injunction, and we won at the district court. We lost at the circuit court. Where's Arizona Circuit Court? San Francisco. All right. So of course we lost there, and that's the most liberal and overturned court in the country. And we barely lost 2-1, but we had a couple other sheriffs join the lawsuit in the Fifth Circuit, which was Texas and Louisiana. Sheriff Coog and Sheriff Romero won. Ultimately, out of over 3,000 sheriffs, 7 joined this lawsuit. Sheriff Prince from Montana and I ended up at the U.S. Supreme Court together. He filed about 6 weeks after I did, and without any collaboration whatsoever. The first time he and I met was at the Phil Donahue show in New York. And when he filed, I was on my way to work, and I heard it on the CBS Morning News on the radio. And I hit the ceiling. I was so thrilled. I did not want to be the Lone Ranger on this lawsuit. You know what happened to people who fought against Bill Clinton, you know? And so Sheriff Prince and I won a case at the United States Supreme Court. We won, okay? I'll bet there's not any of you who know anything about that case. It was the most hidden case of a monumental Supreme Court decision. It's been hidden from you. And I was supposed to be on Meet the Press right after this came out, and on Friday they canceled us. We were supposed to fly out the next day, and they canceled it. Everybody started canceling all our interviews. Janet Reno issued a memo nationwide saying to all sheriffs and chiefs that this was a token victory for the NRA and otherwise meaningless, and don't change anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. And so this really was spun to be forgotten. And so now, pursuant to this, I've resurrected some of the main points in this and put it in the book. And I'll tell you, just like anybody else, any lawyer, any sheriff, cop, anybody, if you find anything in the book that's incorrect or untrue, I'll eat that part out and remove it permanently. Okay? But the paradigm shift that we're a part of right now is that we're not going to focus on these other issues. They'll be solved when we get our Constitution back, county by county. But we've got to focus on what the sheriff can grab, and we've got to follow the KISS philosophy here, don't we? Keep it simple, stupid, or he's not going to get it. You go in there talking about all these other things, he's not going to get it. And he's just going to think you're a nut, and a lot of you are. Sorry? Yeah. Because I know I've been around you guys for a long time, and we're all nuts because we believe in God and freedom and family and country and homeschooling or whatever. Okay? We're not mainstream, so of course we're a nut. So you've got to take it back, way back when you were first learning about these things, because that's where your sheriff is. And we've got to get him on board. And you need to take him this book. And you need to take this book to the county commissioners in your county as well. Give it to your favorite cop. Give it to your favorite deputy. Because those guys are the ones that are going to run against the sheriffs that aren't coming on board with this, that refuse to comply with the Constitution. That's all this is about. It's about two things. take and keep your oath of office and follow the Constitution. Did you know that it's required by the Constitution, by the supreme law of the land, that each officer in the state and in the federal government take an oath? Most of us don't even know that. Well, that's documented in here as well. And first I will preface that by, I've been reading John Adams' biography. And he said that there's no middle way. And that's how I feel. There's no middle way on this, but there's a smart way. We have to be tactful. We have to have a plan to make sure we follow it. So forget Washington, D.C. If any of you are spending time or money on Washington, D.C. politics, you're wasting your time and money. But do you know that we can get just 1 or 2 people in the county and you can have your Constitution back? Just 1 or 2. Actually, you can do it with 1, but we hope he has more backup than that. But you're his boss, and he needs to hear from you. And we're actually starting this, and this thing's going a lot bigger than what you can possibly imagine. We're going to identify 900 sheriff races for 2010. And we're going to make sure that there's a constitutional sheriff running in 900 races across the country. Does that give you an idea? Now that's something you could donate to, okay? Because I'm going to start doing this full time. And we're going to get others to do what I'm doing, and we're going to vet candidates, and we're going to go out there, and we've got people from national organizations that have called me, and I'm meeting with them in Atlanta next weekend, right a week from today. That's where I'll be, in Atlanta, meeting with these people to start this, because they heard about this book and this movement, and they're leaving the national scene to start concentrating on sheriff races nationwide. We're going to do this, but it's got to start with you, okay? The people are the most powerful resource in this government, and that's where we're going to go. The middle way is no way at all. John Adams said to Horatio Gates at the Continental Congress, if we finally fail in this great and glorious contest, it will be by bewildering ourselves in groping for the middle way. We're not going to compromise. We're telling people right up front that this is a peaceful movement out of love for our country and our families. Just like Stuart was saying, we don't want war, we don't want to fight, but I guarantee you the federal government, and I know this from personal experience of the 8 years I was sheriff, they do not want to fight with the sheriffs. I guarantee you they do not want to fight with the sheriffs. That's the thing we take and use to start changing this paradigm of thinking that we have to go along. Again, the fate of our country is in that. If the sheriffs keep their oath of office, we get our Constitution back, the feds get off our back, and we have America back and restored. Look at the possibility there. If your sheriff, you're going, oh, my sheriff won't do it, then we get somebody to run as a constitutional sheriff against that guy, and this can start happening. There's a lot more people that are getting woke up now because of the current administration that will jump on board with this. I mean, how many of you thought Montana would ever make that law that's totally threw the gauntlet down to the federal government about protecting gun businesses in Montana? That's huge. That's brave. That's right. That's exactly right. Now we're going to go over this really quickly as best we can. Now I have a few copies of this. This is the actual decision written by Justice Scalia. This is Mack Prince. This is Jay Prince right here, Richard Mack right here. This is it. Justice Scalia delivered the opinion of the court. Now, I'm not going to go through that per se, but what I've put in the book, we are going to go through that, okay, that part. So, yeah, open your book to if you have the book, they're handy. We're going to start on page 1, the introduction. And right down at the very, well, the second paragraph and about 4 lines down, it's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. And it says, I hope you all are there. It starts with the quotes. When all government shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided and will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. Talking about King George III. Okay, the question now, when government becomes venal and oppressive, we already know, I mean, Stuart covered this already. We already know that government's venal and oppressive. They don't think they have any limitations whatsoever. There is no constitution in their way. They can do whatever they want to us. So where do we go for redress? Washington, D.C., we already covered that. Don't get off track again. Remember, we're focused locally and on the Constitution and the oath. So we go to our sheriff and we ask him the same question. The first thing is, when you're educating him, ask him to read the book. It's only 49 pages. Anybody can read this. There's no excuse for not reading this, is there? I don't have time to read. I can't read. You know, you got 25 minutes. You can read this while you eat a donut, Sheriff. You know? Say that to any of the cops out there. Okay. Ultimate protection is what we're after here. Okay? You need to understand, basically, philosophically, the book points out two things. The one thing, there's 2 sets of wolves. One is the wolf that comes from the street. The other wolf is the wolf that comes from Washington, D.C. They both compete for the same thing: our property, our lives, our families. The only thing, though, you have a better chance with the one that comes from the street. They give you a little bit of a fighting chance. The one from Washington, D.C. doesn't. Okay. I need to tell you just real quickly a little bit about, I want you to understand my conversion to the Constitution. I wasn't born a constitutionalist. I wasn't born in a patriotic home. My wife was. I wasn't. I was a street cop in Utah. That's my picture when I was a sergeant with Provo Police Department. When I was a rookie cop, I just finished working undercover. And you can go to my website, sheriffmack.com. It shows my undercover picture there and all that. After my undercover assignment, I really started questioning what we were doing in the law enforcement, especially the drug war, which is probably the second most ridiculous, farcical, ineffective policy since the establishment of the IRS. Okay? Now, be that as it may, I'm in a department and in a career and job that really wants you to bring in numbers. Okay? We didn't really have quotas, even though actually Provo PD has established quotas since I've left that department, which I never thought I'd see, because it's so blatant in showing what cops are really after. Numbers, money, revenue collection.
Was this under Chief Nielsen?
Yes, Swen Nielsen. Great guy. Good man. But the department was numbers oriented. That's all there is to it. We were actually interviewed by our sergeant. How many tickets you going to write this month? You know, how many misdemeanor arrests? How many felony arrests? You know, and that's your goal. You're out there trying, and they're patting guys on the back that write the most tickets. Ooh, 35 tickets in one day. Yeah, that officer's already. He's going to be the first one promoted. He's always patted on the back, always getting the commendations because they're always out there busy doing something. What? Collecting on the backs of people, especially now. They're increasing tickets now because governments are having a hard time balancing their budget. So who are they doing it on? The backs of the people who are already having trouble economically as well. Shameful. Just absolutely shameful. So I'm back in uniform for a little bit after this, and I'm writing a lot of tickets one day, And I'm at, anybody knows Provo, I'm at 300 South, 600 West, right next to Franklin Elementary School. And Provo, I'm telling you, in the fall can be beautiful, and this was a beautiful fall evening. And I'm sitting there filling out my DAR, my daily activity report, kind of finishing the slash marks on the tickets I'd already been writing. And this lady runs a stop sign right in front of me. I mean, it couldn't have been more blatant, and I'm in a marked unit, you know, the bubble gum red and blue lights on top and everything, and I'm going, what is she doing? Anyway, it looks like, some of you ladies might be able to associate with this or relate to this. It looks like the Tasmanian devil going on in that little car. There are kids flying everywhere. There's feet, there's hands, there's heads, there's hair, there's crying. And this lady, my surmising was that she was so busy trying to settle the kids down that she just didn't know she got that far into the intersection. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And she looks over at me and sees the intersection and just throws her hands up in the air and goes, great, you know, what else could go wrong today? She immediately pulls over. I didn't even turn on my red and blue lights. She just, I get up to the car and she's got her license and registration already out the window. Just, you know, write me the ticket. And she's driving a crappy old Datsun compact station wagon. It's not worth $400. It's a tan color with primer gray showing through. I remember this very well. This is back in like 83, maybe late 82, right in there. And I just start writing the ticket. You know, she's not crying. She's not, oh, please, officer, let me out of this. You know how it is. Your wife probably has a bunch of kids. You know how this goes. And she's probably right, you know, and we did have a bunch of kids. So I just start writing the ticket. And then right before I'm starting to sign my name and my serial number, I paused. And I looked down at this lady, and she's just staring right through the steering wheel, out the front windshield, and she's not there. Her kids are still really acting up, and she's thinking, why did I get up today? Why did I marry that guy? I looked down at her snotty-nosed kids who were dressed not very well. You could tell this was not a family that had money. It was more than obvious just looking at the dilapidated old car. And she's got 4 or 5 kids in there still fighting, crying, you know, and she's completely spacing it out. And after I paused to look at them, I now looked at me. And this was the most penetrating gaze I'd ever had in my life. And I said, Mac, is there anything that you're doing here that's helping this family who obviously can't afford this ticket you're giving them? Is there anything you're doing here that's bringing honor to the badge on your chest? And is there anything you're doing here that's bringing honor to yourself and your family and who you are as a person? Well, now I'm more depressed than the lady is. And I could not talk to her anymore. I didn't say, oh, well, ma'am, I'm cutting you some slack. Aren't I a great guy? If she had thanked me for anything, I don't think I could have handled it at all. I just gave her back her license and registration, and I walked away. The police station's 3.5 blocks from there, and I zoomed over there, tore that ticket in 1,000 pieces, threw them in the trash can in the briefing room, which was against policy, by the way. And I wondered the rest of the evening on that swing shift that ended at 11 o'clock why I was a cop and what the hell I was doing. I'm wondering also that maybe a cop who really had some compassion, who wasn't just a by-the-numbers jerk, would have maybe told the lady, you know what, you didn't mean to run the stop sign. You didn't threaten anybody or even come close to hurting anybody. Why don't you take your kids over to the school right there and let them play for a little bit, get some of that energy out, and you collect yourself a little bit, and then after 10 or 15 minutes, why don't you go on down the road? Wouldn't that have been a great thing to do? That would have been real service. You know, that thing we promised to do, protect and serve us? That never even crossed my mind until I repented of what I was doing. And so The next day I come back to swing shift, and briefing was at 2:30, and I came in about 2:15, and I went to the city clerk's office, and I'll tell you honestly, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know what's directing me or leading me. All I knew is I was looking for something. And so I asked the city clerk if I signed an oath of office. And I don't know what brought that up, but it did. She handed me a copy of it immediately. She burned a copy, and I saw my name on there, and I signed it March 9th of 1979 when I first became a full-time cop. And I promised to uphold and defend and obey the United States Constitution and the Constitution of Utah. And now I'm more depressed than I was the day before. I was a liar and a hypocrite. I took an oath so I could get a paycheck and get a job where I could just have a fun time and a fun job. High-speed pursuits, that's fun. And every cop loves those. And I just wanted an exciting job, and I did not even realize that I had signed my name, gave my word, and I never had read either document in my life, ever. And so I'm serious. I'm literally walking to the chief's office, and I'm going to quit my job. I'm quitting right then and then. I'm going to tell him, Chief, this isn't for me. We're all liars and hypocrites. I'm leaving. Here's my badge, here's my gun. I'll send my uniforms. And then I paused again. I said, hey, Mac, wake up. You don't have to quit your job. You just have to quit being a liar and a hypocrite. And so I went home after briefing, got the World Book Encyclopedia where it said U.S. Constitution, and I'm reading it the rest of the night. And I even got a Utah Constitution and started reading it all the time, too. Especially, though, of both documents, the Bill of Rights. What beautiful penmanship, poetry, law, freedom, liberty, and this is what I promised to protect and obey and defend. I thought, what a noble job we have as peace officers in this country. We're the last line of defense for people's freedom. We're not cops. We're constitutional guards. That's the reason we're here. And yeah, we're still going to investigate traffic accidents, and we're still going to go after criminals and do murder investigations and go to autopsies and whatnot. I did all that. But the important thing is to keep our focus on what we said we would do. And the people could actually depend on us to keep our word to protect their rights and to protect America. So that's what it was. And then I decided to quit Provo PD after 11 years and move home to Arizona, where I was from, and run for sheriff. And with this constitutional background now that I have, when the Brady Bill came out, it was obvious. Do you know that I'd never been a cop in my hometown? I'd never been a cop or law enforcement in Arizona, and I hadn't lived there for 12 years. And I won. It's kind of miraculous. And then I got reelected in 1992, and my wife and my mom has always said, why such a miracle to become sheriff? And then when the Brady Bill came out and I filed lawsuit, both of them within a day said, now we know why. And it was really touching to have both of them be that sensitive. I'm just still kind of going on, you know. All I ever wanted was to be sheriff. If anybody thinks I got in to be sheriff so I could fight Bill Clinton, you didn't want to do that. I did look up history, though, just, you know, and those of you who heard my joke before, too bad, you're going to get it again. I did look up through history, and I was the only person, Sheriff Prince and I were the only people to ever sue Bill Clinton on a non-sexual matter. So, you know. So anyway, he deserves that. So the first thing that I try to make clear to the law enforcement community in the book is our form of government. That's page 13. Okay? In reading John Adams, you know what? He never talks about forming a democracy at all. The book is saturated with times where he's talking about that this is going to be a new experiment in a republic. And even newer yet is that this republic would be completely people-based. and that the people would possess the power, and that the pyramid would be upside down. The people in control here, and then the lowest form of human life would be government. And that it would be our job to keep government in check. We the people, we're in charge of that. And so anybody who thinks that the Founding Fathers were risking their lives and fortunes and sacred honor just to start another democracy here, you're all wet, you're wrong, and that's propaganda. Dumbing down our nation to believe that we're actually a democracy where the majority rules. Do you know what John Adams in his book, do you know what he called a democracy? You've heard a paraphrase of this all the time, but he said a democracy is giving the lamb to the wolf. That's democracy. You think that's what they were after? Not even close. So we explained to the sheriff real quick and to everybody else in the country what that is. That's part of our paradigm shift. We're shifting, folks. You've got to go with this. We're starting a new flow with this. It's only 49 pages. I don't talk about the sunset or the scenery. I get right to the point in this. And then on page 15, erecting barriers. Where does that come from? James Madison said, right at the beginning, third line, we can safely rely on the disposition of state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. Who's the national authority? Federal government. Who's supposed to erect barriers against the encroachments of the federal government? The states. Okay? In this decision, it said that state legislatures or states and political subdivisions of the states are not subject to federal direction. Don't you wish your state knew that? It's in a Supreme Court decision that a sheriff from Montana helped win. And yet we don't know what's in there, do we? It's a monumental landmark decision, probably the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of our country. Do you think that would be worthy of some attention? I would say especially in Arizona and Montana where it was won, you know. And so I talked to Sheriff Prince just 2 or 3 days ago, and or 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm sorry. He said he couldn't be here this weekend while I'm here traveling. He apologized, but we renewed some old times. And I said, Sheriff, I said, tell me honestly, don't you think the title of my book, don't you really think that's the answer? And he says, of course it is. He says, we just need a few more sheriffs with some guts. That's all we're lacking here, folks. Guts sometimes comes from education, that they really know the truth. So this is that, and we're going to be patient while we educate them, but we don't have a lot of time, so we're not going to be real patient, okay? So we're going to move forward with this, and we're going to let them know that, okay? You're going to have them read the book, whoever you give it to, deputies, commissioners, sheriffs, chiefs of police, whoever you get it to, make sure you get back with them and see their response, because the next page is pretty important. No, sorry, the next part is going to be right down about a third up from the bottom. And you say the word powerful, we're starting right next to that. The great innovation of this design, what design is that talking about? Of our government design, was that our citizens would have 2 political capacities, one state and one federal. Get this, it's in bold. Each protected from incursion by the other. Who protects us from incursions from the federal government? According to the United States Supreme Court. We do. The state of Montana does that protection. Is the county exempt from that? No. The county is a political subdivision of the state and has the same responsibility, probably even more so. Because as Jefferson said, the smaller the government, the more service to the people. That's where government works best, is at the local level. So of course we depend on our local officials to do that. Besides, most states aren't doing that. So we will. And where does it work best? In our own county, in our own jurisdiction, in our own homes. Keep going. A legal system unprecedented in form. Where am I reading from? Where does this come from? This all is a quote from the Supreme Court decision, Mack, Prince versus U.S. Establishing two forms of government, each with its own direct relationship, its own privity, its own set of rights and obligations to the people who sustain it and are governed by it. Madison is then quoted by Scalia. This is mostly Madison talking here, Scalia quoting Madison. Then, the local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of what? The supremacy. The federal government says they're supreme because the supremacy clause, supremacy clause, supremacy clause, supremacy clause. They say it all the time. The supremacy clause is quoted then later in the book. What does the supremacy clause say? That the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and only laws made pursuant thereof are supreme. That makes it pretty clear now, doesn't it? But who shares in the supremacy? The local or municipal authorities, the counties. And Stewart even said this word. He said sphere. You remember what he said sphere earlier? That's a quote from Mack Prince. Sphere. It says, no more subject within their respective spheres to the general authority than the general authority is subject to them within its own sphere. Where do we define the federal government sphere? Exactly. What part of the Constitution? Article 1, Section 8. It says what the federal government is allowed to do. In that, is the federal government sovereign and supreme? Yes. In Article 1, Section 8. But is it very limited and enumerated and very small? Yes. It's the smallest sphere in the world. Do you know how many federal or law enforcement assignments are constitutionally given to the federal government? 4. Can you name them? Treason.
Piracy.
Felonies committed on the high seas or piracy. Counterfeiting. And maybe laws against treaties of nations, which probably doesn't apply too much to us anyway. But and then there's another part where it says they're supposed to protect our country from invasion. So I'll give them border enforcement. Do it. Why don't they try it now? They've done a real bang-up job there, haven't they? Which shows us, you turn something over to the federal government, you're going to get a mess. Next page. This is also very, very vital in this second paragraph where it says Justice Scalia emphasizes this point. Get this, folks. This separation of the two spheres is one of the Constitution's structural protections of liberty. What is it? A structural protection of liberty. That there is a separation between the two spheres. A healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government will reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse from either front. Folks, that's a Supreme Court decision, and it's also James Madison. And it's the law. Why? Because it's the supreme law of the land. It's right out of the Constitution. It's right from the Founding Father. Probably the main guy when it comes to the Constitution, considered the father of the Constitution, James Madison. Go back, just next one, just skip a sentence. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other. Different governments will control each other? At the same time, each will be controlled by itself. Then the next question. So who is in charge of safeguarding the people from the federal government when it refuses to control itself? And then it says in parentheses, please write your answer in the space provided. And there's a little homework for you, whoever you give the book to. Tell them to answer that. It's real simple. And there's a lot of right answers. You could say we the people, or state government, or county government, or it would really be great if he said, I am. Yeah, that's the best answer there. I am, or the sheriff, or something like that. That's if you see an answer like that, you're on your way. We've got that paradigm shifting, and you're helping, and it's going, it's working. Okay? The 10th Amendment basically says this: if the federal government ever hopes or ever dreams of becoming creative and wants to expand the federal bureaucracy or federal government's role or federal power, if they ever want to get creative and go outside Article 1, Section 8, what do they refer to? The 9th and 10th Amendment, saying everything outside Article 1, Section 8 belongs to the states or the people, respectively, which also shows you how sovereign and powerful we are as people. We're as powerful as the states because we formed them and they formed the federal government. The federal government didn't start us. Heck, this thing, have you seen this? It's a small U. The states are just united, not United States. Okay? It's a small U. When they declared our independence 233 years ago, we weren't independent. We declared it. These brave 56 men signed their death warrants when they signed this. What do we owe them today? To go along with the federal government and the tyranny that's facing us today? It's 10 times worse than what they had. We need to get moving here. And don't make any mistake. I totally agree with what Stuart said earlier, and I'm going to reiterate it, and nobody is to say any different. This is a peaceful process. I'm the most peaceful man you've ever met in your life. In 20 years of law enforcement, I never shot anybody, never slugged anybody, never hit, beat up anybody, never nightstick, tasered, any of that. It's not necessary most of the time. And that guy that showed him on YouTube that tasered the 72-year-old great-grandmother, he's twice her size and he has to taser her? Do you know what we know from that incident? That guy's in the wrong line of work. That's all we know from that. And he needs to go look for another job. Maybe, being a bouncer where he can get in fights more or something. The 10th Amendment basically says this: federal government, if you think the Founding Fathers ever forgot something, you can't do that either. Okay? Now, where did I put my Citizens Rule Book? Okay, right here. We have got to understand, and let your sheriff know this as well, what's the purpose of government? Okay, we hear all the time politicians when they're running for office, or yesterday when they're celebrating the 4th of July, that they'll talk about, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They don't know anything about that, but they'll still spew it out of their mouths like they're big heroes. Okay? And that you ought to vote for them again because they know the first 2 lines of the Declaration of Independence. And then after you talk about that among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, ask them the next line. To secure these rights. Thank you. Governments are instituted among men. To secure what? So why do we have government? To secure these rights. Sheriff, why are you here? Anybody in the state rep? We have a state rep. More, yeah. Why do we have, is it Mike? No wonder I heard that name before. Mike Moore? I hate your dad. No. Stepfather. Okay, good. Okay, that's all right then. No. Why do we have Mike here in the Montana State Legislature? To secure these rights. Why do you have a president Well, let's not go to him right now. Why do you have a U.S. senator? Why do you have a state rep? Why a U.S. rep, dog catcher, sheriffs, especially cops, chief of police? All of them need to know and understand that their main job is to secure these rights. Okay? That's it. How far off are we? Well, let's look at if we just wanted to look at one little thing. Ronald Reagan left office 20 years ago and 5 months. Okay? Do you know what his budget was when he left? $450 billion. And he said it was too high. He should have abolished a couple of departments. He said he was going to abolish the Department of Education. Didn't do it. We still need to help him keep that promise. And, you know, get on to some others too, like the IRS and a few others. And do you know what the budget is today? Does anybody know what it is today? Can anybody count that high? It has increased in 20 years 800%. Yeah. Man, why don't they put that on Wall Street? I'd invest in government. You know darn well next year it's going to be bigger. And this is a lot bigger. And just to show, huh?
What was Reagan's budget?
$450 billion. And it was too big, even by his own admission. It was too big. $450 billion. And it was too much. And now, and folks, that's why I reiterate, and Stuart touched on this a little bit. This isn't partisan because who did that? And those of you who are still trying to cling to the Republican Party a little bit, they were there and in charge. They had it all. Anyway, it's both parties. They both have done it. And now what do? We participate in this paradigm shift where locally, I can't wait for the sheriff and the governor and the state rep and other people who say we're going to stop sending our money to that cesspool of corruption in Washington, D.C., and we're going to withhold even income tax from that beast that is using our money to destroy us with. And we're not going to do it anymore. Man, I can't wait to be part of that plan. You know? So, another thing I can't wait for is for a sheriff to warn the IRS about no more confiscation and seizures of homes, and then they do it, and he arrests them. Man, I can't wait. I'll do it. Oh, man. Yeah. Gosh, I can't wait for that day. Okay. What excuse that, you know, there's lots of theirs, there's lots of naysayers. Page 22, I think. Last couple of paragraphs. And I'm talking about, you know, the sheriff. When it comes to the IRS, in 1998, did you know that Congress actually held hearings about the abusive and criminal nature of the IRS? And employees, current agents, Jennifer Long being one from Florida, testified before Congress of the crimes IRS was committing against you and us, citizens. It actually happened to my father right after he retired from the FBI. He's teaching school part-time now in law enforcement at community college. They do a random audit. Are random audits law enforcement constitutional things to do? No! We couldn't, and when I was a cop, I couldn't go looking around the community. You know what? I'll bet they're abusing their kids in there. Let's go audit them. Isn't that more important than auditing for money? Yeah, we're saving children. It's for the children. I mean, how many times did Bill Clinton say that? So that's all. That was always a good excuse. You could violate the Constitution as long as it was for the children. Okay? So why not have local law enforcement start going in homes and interview the kids, see if they're being abused. That's more important than auditing to see if you paid all your taxes. This is for the children. You can't do it. Stuart said this earlier. No matter what we want to do, the Constitution restricts it. And guess what? This principle was applied in Mack prints. It's absolutely amazing. Look at page 36, I think it is, real quickly. Yeah. The second paragraph, the very first line. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. Do you get that? It's probably the most powerful thing I've heard from the Supreme Court in a century. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. Do you want me to go on? The next part isn't in this book. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we may resist the temptation to concentrate power in one location as an expedient solution to the crisis of the day. End quote. That's all in the Mack Prince case. Isn't that beautiful? So principled, so true, so right on with the Founding Fathers' intent of every bit of this. And do you know how we get back? Do you know how we get back to our Constitution? We have a sheriff that reads this book and he says, you know what? This stuff's right. I don't have to let these guys in my county anymore. I don't have to go along. No, he doesn't banish them. He doesn't go up to every IRS and Forest Service agent right now and say, you're out of here. But he does put them on notice. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had like 30 sheriffs in Montana that wrote a letter to the federal government and all their auxiliary bureaucracies and saying, look, we've got a new policy here. The Constitution will be enforced. No violation of it will be allowed. And any type of violation of the Constitution will be treated by this sheriff's office as a criminal offense. And we will take action. Read your constitutions, especially your Bill of Rights, you federal government employees, because its violation will not be tolerated in Lincoln County or in whatever county you live in, okay? It will not be tolerated. Why? Because I took an oath to it, and I'm a constitutional guard. I'm not just the Shire of the Reeve, okay? If they don't, we keep sliding down in this cesspool of corruption in Washington, D.C., and they will take care of us. I guarantee you. This country has been asking for the federal government to take care of us, and you know what? They will. And believe me, you don't want them to. Now, let's be real specific here, and I'm probably going to write a second edition to this really soon, because I think that the thing that I always say in my talks should probably be in here. And that is, what does a constitutional sheriff look like? Okay, and I want to put this into historical perspective for you, so that you will know that the example set by some people already in this country is something that we should be applying locally. Okay, and this is it. In 1959, what was going on in our country? Segregation. And do you know that segregation was actually endorsed by the United States Supreme Court at one time, saying it's proper, good, it's okay, everything's fine. And that law enforcement was actually enforcing segregation. Okay? And so when Rosa Parks got arrested on the bus, what should have happened if we had constitutional guards? Okay? Now, again, stay focused here on the principle involved. Don't worry about the rumors about Rosa Parks or who she really was or what she really did or that she was tied with anybody else or subversive groups or conspiracy theories. Remember, use this stuff for our paradigm shift. That's what we're doing. Remember, we're staying focused on that. Okay? So the sheriff is at the office when the bus driver made the call on the payphone to the sheriff's office. He's there. He hears it. This is a constitutional sheriff. He tells the deputy, I want you coming with me and I want you to know how to handle this call in the future. The deputy thinks, oh, Rosa Parks in trouble now, isn't she? Yeah, she's in for it. The sheriff's going to show me how to handle this lady. So the sheriff and the deputy arrive and get on the bus, and he sees the lady and he says, ma'am, what seems to be the problem here? And she goes, Why can't we just be left alone? Sound familiar? Randy Weaver just wanted to be left alone. We saw what happened to him. And he goes, you know what, Mrs. Parks, I think you're right. He said, do you mind if I sit down next to you? And she's going, uh-oh, you know, she's very suspicious, of course. He sits down to her and he shakes her hand. And he says, Mrs. Parks, where do you get off the bus? She goes, 2 stops up on Elm Street. And he goes, do you mind if I get off with you? She's getting even more suspicious. Well, yeah, I guess that's all right. Yeah, you know. So he gets off with her. The deputy's in tow, and the deputy's wondering, well, when's he going to lower the boom, you know? And they get off the bus, and he goes, Miss Parks, it's kind of late. Do you need to get some hamburgers for you and your husband? She goes, yeah. He goes, come on, let's go over to the all-white restaurant and get some burgers and sandwiches for you and your family. So they go in there, and the sheriff makes sure she gets served them real quick, too. She gets them, and she takes them home. He walks with her going home. He goes to her house. And Mr. Parks comes out and says, what's up? And he says, well, hey, Mr. Parks, I'm Sheriff Mack, and, or Sheriff Jones. Let's not use me. There was a little trouble. He says, do you have a gun in the house? And Mr. Parks says, well, yeah, sure, of course I do. He says, is it loaded? He says, yeah, I keep my shotgun loaded. He said, good. There might be a little trouble tonight. He turns to his deputy and says, you make sure you give extra patrol all night long and make sure the next shift does so as well. Every 15 or 20 minutes you're to drive by here and make sure nobody's throwing rocks or doing anything else stupid, because this is going to get out that she was a troublemaker tonight. And he says, Mr. Parks, you keep that shotgun real handy, and you guys give us a call if there's any trouble. My dear friends, that's a constitutional sheriff. And today, that constitutional sheriff does the same thing for Rosa Parks, the gun owner, or Rosa Parks, the rancher, or Rosa Parks, the landowner, or Rosa Parks, the homeschooler, or Rosa Parks, the tax protester, or whatever else it may be. Do you know what? I finally came up with the answer watching Ron Paul and his campaign. Maybe some of you got this. But he finally said what actually made sense. I was trying to always come to grips with, what do we do to replace the federal income tax? You know, sales tax, flat rate, national sales tax, what do we do? And when he said, I would abolish the IRS and abolish the federal income tax and replace them with nothing. Of course. Thank you, Ron Paul. So then, where can we really make that happen? The states can make it happen. And I can't wait to see it. I know it can happen. I know it can be done. I would even love to see a sheriff say, you know what? Folks, I'm not going to pay my federal income tax anymore. Who's joining me? And until we have honest, constitutional government in Washington, D.C., I'm not paying them any more of my money. And then if they'll put back a economic system constitutionally backed by gold and silver, then I'll start again maybe. And not until then. And this education process and this paradigm shift keeps going. Now, none of you take that to your sheriff first thing, right? Okay. But I'm telling you where this thing's going to go. But remember, what's the principle here? KISS. Keep it simple. That's why the book is simple. That's why it's there. That's why it's your tool. Remember, you can get 5 of them for that silver coin today. Okay? Get them out there. Okay? Spread this. Yeah, we've been really doing and moving, getting 10,000 of these out. Now in the next 4 months, it needs to be 100,000. We have some states that haven't ordered any for sheriffs. We only have about 5 states that have all the sheriffs covered. Wouldn't it be great if every sheriff ends up getting about 3 or 4 or 5 of them? You think by the 5th time he might get the message? So let's not worry about who's got them. Let's worry about, let's make sure ours has them and keep going from there. Maybe there'll be 5 or 6 or 7 in the office, and they'll be passing them around. We'll be educating everybody. This paradigm shift that we're moving and this movement that we're taking across the country has got to move along here with some haste. I don't think we have much time left. Some of these things are going to be irreparable if we don't move along. We're talking about saving our country here. Isn't it amazing? I'm going back to this oath of office now. Isn't it absolutely astonishing that the people who have sworn that oath to uphold and defend the United States Constitution, when you ask them about that they'll say, either pragmatically or they'll just flat out tell you, it's not my job to uphold and defend the United States Constitution. Well, just what in the hell did you take your oath for? Maybe it was kind of like me when I took mine. Everybody can change, huh? I did. And I know this can happen. And not everybody's going to get hit over the head with the epiphany that I got with that lady in the dilapidated old Datsun. But that's where you come in. And now it's your turn to be the lady in the old Datsun. You've got to take this and have an epiphany with your sheriff and your servants. And if he's not going to come along, like it looks like one of the sheriffs that we were in his county this past weekend, then we find somebody who runs against him, and we get the people on board, and we get all the Rosa Parks together, and all the gun nuts and tax protesters and everybody else in the county, and we're going to say, you know what? We're going to elect a sheriff who isn't going to allow our homes to be taken by the criminality of the IRS. And we're not going to do this anymore. And we're going to just shift this, and we're going to educate those federal agents that come in our county and think they own our county. We found out what goes wrong and what happens when you have sheriffs that abdicate their authority and let the federal government run amok. We saw what happens in Ruby Ridge. We saw what happens at Waco. These people that come in and can hit and run, your sheriff isn't a hit and run guy. He lives there. It's his people. It's his community. It's his home. It's his family that lives there. And I've talked this over with Randy Weaver a lot. And he totally agrees with me that if the sheriffs had remained in charge in both Ruby Ridge and Waco, the law would still have been enforced, what little there was, and nobody would have been killed, especially federal agents. And yet everything would have been worked out and fine, and Randy would still have his wife and son and maybe grandkids now from Sam's kids, and 89 people wouldn't have had to burn to death in Waco. And this is that serious. Why? Because we're talking about our country here. And this stuff is just basic fundamentals here. It's just all right here. And this was the first book I wrote, pursuant to the Mack Prince case at the U.S. Supreme Court. And there's a quote in there from Alan Keyes that says this. We can, the only difference between today's slavery and the slavery of the Old South is that at least the plantation owners had to pay for the chains. And folks, John Adams was asked during the Revolutionary War, can we really do this? There's some of you in here that are incredulous about what I've said and what's here. If you got a better plan, tell me, because I'm going to jump on it. Because I don't see anything more effectual, more rapid, more easy. You don't have to work with Washington is the biggest thing. You have to work with your friends in your own community to get this done. But they were facing the greatest power on earth. Maybe we are today. The one with all the armies and the weaponry. The one with all the money. With all the attorneys, with all the armies, all soldiers, and they're going to follow orders. They asked that to John Adams. How could we beat Great Britain? They got the biggest navy. We don't have any. It's the same answer today, my dear friends. Duty is ours. Results are God's. So we do our duty and we leave the rest to Him. When I was, real quick.
Well, what if a sheriff, a local sheriff, he refuses to supply or assist the EPA, FCC, OSHA, FBI, CIA.
Great.
Does he have to do what you did, have an army of lawyers ready at the Supreme Court?
No, I'm glad you brought that up. Perfect. Great question. First of all, yeah, they sue us now, not us them. I wish I had never filed the lawsuit. There was a sheriff, what county was he from? Nixon, Ray Nixon, when we did the lawsuit? He was here in Montana. He gave the answer. It may have been Lincoln County. He says, I'm not doing the Brady Bill, and refused to do it. Never joined the lawsuit, and here's Prince and I spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. Cost me my re-election bid. I guess it helped Jay, but it didn't help me at all. And this is the thing I learned. There's not enough time or money to go after the federal government on every one of these deals. So make them sue us, if they will. They're not going to have time to do it either. There's not time even with them and all their money. And even if a court tells me I can't stand in their way, you know what I'll do tomorrow? I'll stand in their way. And I'll require it. And you know what? Maybe I'll give them a tour of the Mack Hotel and let them see what that's like. And I'm going to keep going, and I will uphold and defend the Constitution. I don't care what judge tells me not to. I don't care what legislature tells me not to. I don't care what federal officer tells me to. I don't care if the wife or the barber down on Main Street tells me not to do this. I'm going to keep my oath. And I'll stop keeping my oath when I get out of office. Okay? That's it. No more lawsuits. I'm not going to do any more lawsuits. I don't want any sheriff doing lawsuits. I learned 3.5, almost 4 years and $350,000 later, we won, and everybody ignored it anyway. Okay? I'm the only one that's brought it back. And yeah, Sheriff Prince was right. Now we need, after we give this to him, you can't give your sheriff courage. I hope he's a good enough person that when you go to him, he musters up some on his own. But you got to stand behind him. He needs to form posses with people like you. That's the best way to protect the right to keep and bear arms, is make everybody in the county a member of the posse. And give them an ID saying, if any federal agent comes up to you, he says, hey, I got my sheriff posse ID and it says I'm supposed to be armed. If you want to disarm me, check with the sheriff. Yeah, I'm armed. These are simple things that can happen. These are true, simple, and powerful things that can happen. And you know, I'm feeling the freedom juices flowing, and I'm going to finish my talk the way I always do. Okay? When I was searching the Constitution out as a rookie cop, I told you the story. Well, while I was studying the Constitution, there came a notice down in the briefing room of constitutional studies for law enforcement officers, issued by post in the state of Utah. And the instructor was somebody I hope you've heard of, W. Cleon Skousen.
Oh, yeah.
And he used to work with the FBI with my father. He was a friend of my father-in-law, fathers-in-law. And so I went to this. And I had to take vacation time to go because my chief wouldn't let me go. Swen would not let me go. And so I took off vacation. I was the only one of 240 cops that was there on my own time. And during this 2-day seminar, this frail, powerful, kind of homely man converted me to the United States Constitution. And I do mean converted. And it was a powerful religious experience for me. And I loved it. And during one time, we were in a building twice this big. He made all of us get up, and he stood up on a pedestal back here, and he took us through a kindergarten exercise. And I leave it with you as my complete devotion to you and my country, and to my kids that I've taught this to, and to my precious little Liberty, my first grandchild born 3 years ago yesterday, and her name's Liberty. And I've taught it to her, and she knows it all. She knows it by heart now. And it's amazing how smart people can get if you put the truth in front of them. And so I leave it with you today. I'll answer questions later if you want, or come and see me while you're getting 5 or 6 more books to get these out there. And this little kindergarten exercise goes like this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And that's the eagle. Long may she be free. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.